Hello, and welcome to this week's Bible study. I always like to start the Bible study out with a deep breathing exercise. So we're just going to take 3 deep breaths. So want to do that with me now? Okay, cool. So go deep breath in. No. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Deep breath in. Fantastic. And then after the breathing, I like to listen to a quiet worship song. For those watching on YouTube, I can't play the video here, but if you go into the description of the video, you're going to see a link for the quiet worship, and I would love it if you actually pause this video and then clicked on the link and then listen to it, and then when you're done, come back. Yeah, that sound fun? That sound like a plan? Cool. Well, you can pause the video right now. And you're back. I hope it was a lovely song for you. It was a pain in the ass to find that song because I couldn't remember the lyrics, and I just remembered like the vibe of it, and all of the lyrics that I could remember were very stereotypical Christian worship song, and then it turns out in the end I didn't even remember the lyrics correctly, so that was like 2 days of agony for nothing. But you know, it's still a pretty neat song, so I'll allow it. So after worship I like to do a prayer for the study. It's just a little written prayer, same as it always is. So yeah, we're gonna do that. God, hey God, how's it going? I just want to thank you for bringing us all here tonight. Please guide my tongue and heart during this teaching, and guide everyone during the discussion and prayer time. Help us to be a reflection of your light by enlightening us to your ways with love, patience, and curiosity. We love you, God. Help us to love each other like you love us. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so let's get into the study part. Just a quick note for those who missed it. I made a huge hubbub over making this new channel and moving the study there, but YouTube ended up being stupid about it, so I figured it'd just be easier for everyone if I just changed the name of this channel. So just to clear up any confusion on that, so for those watching on YouTube, this used to be Demaja Heinemann's channel, but now it's the Least of Us Ministry channel, and that's all you gotta know. Okay, you don't gotta do nothing. Just chill. You also might notice that I am still in the van, and it's still winter, so it's darker than it needs to be. Something's going on with Mia. I don't know what, but she hasn't been talking to me. So, well, I guess we'll get more into that in the prayer. But for now, I'm back in the van until further notice. So let's just move on to the next chapter of Genesis, chapter 22 for now. We're still in the Amplified version. This one we're going into the binding of Isaac, as it's known in the scholarly community. So let's just go head first into this. Genesis 22 of the Amplified version starts out. Now after these things, God tested the faith and commitment of Abraham, and said to him, Abraham. And he answered, Here I am. God said, Take now your son, your only son of promise, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So real quick, God kind of snubs Ishmael a little bit by saying, Isaac is his only son. Probably he just meant like the only son he had with him, or the only legitimate heir to God's covenant. I like to think he was just really trying to force the messianic parallelisms at the sake of not making sense, just for the lulz, but it was probably one of the former options. Interestingly, depending on the time and religious sect you read this in, it's not always Isaac who God wants sacrificed. In Islam, for example, the son is unidentified, so Muslims can claim it was Ishmael, and thus further claim to be descended from the covenantal son. So, fun fact for you there. But also less quick. This is one of those times when God asks you to do some random, potentially harmful thing that doesn't seem to have a valid reason for it, only for it to end up being like a test of sorts where it just all works out in the end. Many of the faithless argue it's a bit cruel to test people randomly for no reason, but what they fail to realize is that there is a reason, okay? It's not the kind of test, just to see what you'll do. It's the kind that builds strength and confidence, like a trial by fire kind of thing. Like, for example, like a quick backstory on me. I grew up in an abusive household, and I'd been in abusive relationships, and after I got out of that situation, I had always wondered what I'd do if I saw it happening to someone else. We all like to think we'd be very active, but there was also this part of me that thought I might cower in fear, just triggered by my own past. Well, one day, God tested me. I was like just in my bed on my day off, trying to sleep in, and I hear this couple, my neighbors, just screaming at each other, like banging around. Like, obviously they were in the middle of a very physical altercation, and I can hear like the woman shout like, "Get off, stop it," that kind of thing. And I immediately got up and I grabbed this like bat I had and my guard dog, and I went over and I just started banging on their door until they like came out and started yelling at me for disrupting them. But then they started like physically fighting in front of me, and I couldn't break them up. So out of options, I had to unfortunately call the cops on them. It was just like this whole mess. And I hope they're doing better now. Last I heard, they did break up, and the guy, I think, eventually got arrested. It didn't happen that first time, but eventually he got arrested for domestic abuse. But I'm hoping they're doing better now separately. It was definitely stupid of me to try and break that up myself, looking back at it. I do not recommend, if you hear like a domestic disturbance, it probably isn't the best idea if you're not trained to intervene in that sense. But after that day, I knew I was the kind of person who would absolutely involve myself in other people's business if I thought they were in danger. And that kind of confidence made me more willing to focus on the people around me, but also confidence in myself, that I'm not the kind of person to just sit idly by while I see people suffering. I didn't know that before, and I appreciate that I know it now. I did learn some kind of empathy from my past situations, at least. We don't often know the truth of our own hearts, but God does, and He wants to show them to us through these trials. So testing from God usually just means a strength or confidence builder. Some things can only be forged in fire, but I don't think this was just God trying to push Abraham to stronger forms of faith. As I've stated, this has strong ties to the story of Jesus, which we're going to get into later. But many scholars agree that this was God saying if humans were willing to do the same thing for him as he was to do for us, or planning to do for us. Excuse me. In a healthy relationship, you should try to make sure that both parties are giving equal amounts of effort. Even though God knew what would happen, we don't, sorry, we don't, and God is the type to lead by example. He is showing us that he's not giving us everything automatically. I wouldn't say it's exactly earned either, though. He's more allowing us the opportunity to contribute. One-sided relationships aren't a great precedent to set. Abraham's response to God's command will determine how humanity is shaped by God henceforth. So God isn't just deciding to send a Messiah willy-nilly. He's checking with us to see if we would want a Messiah in the first place. If we could even handle and accept one. If we can understand the weight of it all and appreciate that kind of sacrifice. So what was Abraham's response to this sudden and seemingly contradictory command? Well, let's find out in the next verse. So Abraham got up early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac, and he split the wood of the burnt offering, and then he got up and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day of travel, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. So the writers didn't think that it was necessary or important to convey directly what Abraham felt about this command. Likely they thought it doesn't matter how you feel, only what you do. But I feel like you can still get a glimpse of Abraham's feelings through his actions. He got up early, so he likely had a very sleepless night, wrestling with the thought of killing his only legitimate heir, maybe like double checking with God, like, are you sure that's what you said? Because I want to make sure I heard you, just like a whole night of that. He also saddled his own donkey and split the wood himself, despite having many servants and being very old himself. This likely helped to ease any nervous energy he might have had, and also shows he felt that a task such as this must be done by his own hands. Consider also the 3 days that it took to get to the place that they needed to go. So 3 very long days of Abraham traveling with his son, contemplating, agonizing, wondering, just screaming in his head like the whole time. Or maybe he wasn't letting it bother him at all and he just trusted God completely. Maybe he intuited that there was some trick up his sleeve. Human sacrifice was not a new thing at this time. Plenty of surrounding pagan nations practiced it, but God obviously never asked for such things himself. So Abraham likely thought that God wasn't like that. Maybe this made Abraham have second thoughts on this assumption, but given the time, it likely didn't shock him too much that God wanted a human sacrifice. It'd be like me asking for a like and subscribe for this video. Everyone on YouTube asks for a like and subscribe because that's how you please the algorithm gods. So it's not exactly weird for me to ask for the same thing, but I haven't personally made that my opening or closing tag as of yet, because I just don't care really. So it's kind of weird if I just started suddenly, so thousands of years ago, human sacrifice was kind of similar. It's just what you did to please the gods of the time, minus our God, so generally God never made such demands, so it likely confused Abraham at least a little, but he was probably more concerned with the fact that it was Isaac specifically that God wanted. Isaac, who God promised would bring forth descendants as numerous as the sands on the shore and bless the nations. Maybe Ishmael he would have been more okay with. Come on, let's save Isaac. Personally, I would have just assumed I was having a schizophrenic breakdown, because the God I know wouldn't ask such a thing of me. Post Jesus, with ready access to the Bible, we can ensure who God is and what it is that He would require of us. Anything that contradicts Scripture can be safely ignored as some kind of demonic attempt. But Abraham didn't have access to a Bible or even a Torah at this time. And technically, he was one of the few official believers of God at this time. There weren't any priests or anything around. So this likely forced Abraham to rely solely on God and his own spiritual intuition to discern what was God and what was not. The text doesn't say how Abraham knew this was something God for sure wanted from him. My guess is that God was probably a lot more blatant back then, because he didn't have scriptures and priests and all that stuff that we're spoiled with today. So it's probably a lot more obvious that it was God back then. But either way, he did in fact correctly discern that it was in fact God saying it, and without any physical hesitation, he fulfilled that command until told otherwise. Even though it seemed to go against God's promise to him, Abraham chose to trust the promiser over the promise. It's not our job to fulfill those promises for God. We only obey. We often get the sense from the Spirit that God is going to help us accomplish a thing. And we get so focused on the thing and the normal path to achieve the thing, we forget to listen to God's guidance on how He wants us to get to the thing. God doesn't often want us to do things the normal way. He thrives against the current. So it's just like how He gets other people to notice and follow, by standing out. So we can't really make this exact case for what happened here, since it was more of a test than a path to success. But it has that same kind of vibe. God wanted Abraham to do the opposite of what would be required of making Isaac's descendants numerous, and the result was an even bigger blessing than direct descendants, because it further opened up the door for the Messiah as well. So it's not a perfect analogy for why one should listen to God's contradictory advice, but it still gives you that reminding sense. So might as well throw that point in there. So let's now move on to the next point with the preceding verse. It continues. Abraham said to his servants, "Settle down and stay here with the donkey. The young man and I will go over there and worship God, and we will come back to you." Then Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on the shoulders of Isaac, his son. And he took the fire in his own hand and the sacrificial knife, and the two of them walked on together. So real quick, the word worship, at least the Hebrew one used for it, is actually the first one used in reference to God in the Bible. It literally means to bow down, as in they're not there for joyful praise or emotionally stimulating contemplation. They're there to submit to God's will. The commentator Barnhouse adds to this by saying, we often wonder what the will of God is, but 90% of knowing God's will is having the willingness to do whatever it is before being asked to do it. And Abraham definitely seems to exemplify this attitude. Note also how Abraham says, "we will come back." Now this could be Abraham lying so the servants or Isaac don't mess up the sacrifice by freaking out. But or it could also note faith, that Abraham thinks Isaac isn't actually going to die, or at least denial. Some think Abe thought that God would resurrect Isaac after sacrificing him, or he thought he wouldn't have to go through with it in some way. God did, after all, say that Isaac was the one, so there must be something up God's sleeves, and there was, as it turns out. But we can also just acknowledge how Isaac had to carry the wood meant to burn him. Did Isaac know what was going on? How'd he feel about all this? Let's discuss this in the next verse, after the next verse, which is, "And Isaac said to Abraham, 'My father.' And he said, 'Here I am, my son.' Isaac said, 'Look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?' Abraham said, 'My son, God will provide for himself a lamb for the burnt offering.' So the two walked on together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood, and bound Isaac his son, and placed him on the altar on top of the wood." Okay, so this was the main thing that I struggled with in this text. You know, how aware and willing was Isaac throughout this process? And it technically doesn't super matter. it's more like a curiosity. Now, looking at the text directly, it seems like he was very unaware and unwilling. He asked his dad where the sacrificial lamb was, implying that he didn't know it was him. And Abe responded vaguely, "Oh, God will provide one," implying Abe wasn't being upfront about this. And once at the sacrificial spot, Abe ties up Isaac, further implying he didn't want Isaac to struggle against him as he killed him. Now, on the other end, a seeming majority of both Christian and Jewish scholars think that Isaac was completely aware and even willing for what was about to take place, which was kind of why I was like, wait, was he? Because that's not what I was reading. Why do you think that? And the argument goes maybe he didn't know what was going on at first, since Isaac was wondering where the lamb was. That's obvious enough. But he definitely knew, allegedly, by the time he got tied up, which, by the way, him being tied up is why many call this story the binding of Isaac. You know, it's, just in case you were wondering. Many scholars argue a strapping young man like Isaac could have easily overpowered his 100-plus-year-old father to prevent him from tying him up. They say that Isaac was actually the one to ask to be tied up because he didn't want to flinch and thus negate his sacrifice. So, and this would obviously go along with the messianic parallel if Isaac was a willing sacrifice, as Jesus would be. I personally think this explanation draws on too many assumptions, but I also can't think of how an old man could tie up his young son without the son overpowering him if the son was unwilling. Maybe Isaac was just really dumb and naive, or maybe Abraham still had that special old man strength. You know, he did split that wood after all. That requires some strength. But this also still relies on a good amount of assumptions. So I suppose you'll just have to decide for yourself how aware and willing Isaac was during this process. There's no clear indication that Isaac was upset about this, at least afterwards. So it's hard to say one way or another for sure. But all we know is what happened after he got tied up, which is Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." He answered, "Here I am." The Lord said, "Do not reach out with the knife in your hand against the boy, and do nothing to harm him. For now I know that you fear God with reverence and profound respect, since you have not withheld your son from me, your only son of promise." Then Abraham looked up, glanced around, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. Real quick, first of all, notice that the angel of the Lord called to him and stopped him from killing his son. And as we've come to know, angel of the Lord is code for Old Testament Jesus. So think about this head tripper for a minute. So future Jesus stops this messianic parallel from happening. He stops Isaac from being sacrificed. Kind of just like metaphor for like what's going to happen with Jesus, except Jesus is actually going to sacrifice himself. And then he also offers up this male ram, this male sheep, much like he is a male sheep he's going to get sacrificed. It's just like, I don't know, it's like Inception. it's like prophetic Inception. But also, when Abraham like looked up and glanced around and he saw a sheep, I'm guessing Abraham was just so relieved that he didn't have to murder his son. He looked around for something to praise God with, and behold, a ram. That's a mentality. That's the image I'm imagining. Anyways, okay, moving on. And Abraham went and he took the ram and he offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham named that place "The Lord Will Provide," or Jehovah Jireh. And it is said to this day, on the mountain of the Lord it will be seen and provided. So yay, God didn't make him go through with murdering his son. So I also just say, like I said, it is crazy that the angel of the Lord was the one to stop the sacrifice, and Jesus literally saved someone from being sacrificed. And let's not also miss, man, I'm just realizing that I repeated something beforehand. This is why you gotta stick to the notes, because I could have sworn that I mentioned it, but I was like, oh, maybe I didn't. Maybe I should say it now. And then it was literally the next thing I was gonna say. So anyways, I mainly want to focus here on the fact that Isaac was not in fact sacrificed to God in this instance, and it's the closest thing you're ever going to get to bodily sacrifice in the name of God, minus the genus incident. And technically there was like that one guy who sacrificed his daughter, but we'll get into that later. It's not something God actually wanted to happen, to be clear. This is Jesus was the only bodily sacrifice that God actually wanted to happen. So there's that. So some argue that Abraham did kill Isaac, but God revived him. However, I quite simply don't see that in the text, and it kind of messes up the metaphor of the Messiah anyway. Isaac is meant to represent the humanity that should get rightfully burned away. But Jesus literally steps in and saves their lives. So that foreshadowing doesn't work if Isaac gets killed anyways. And it also leaves the idea that God is cool with human sacrifice. In fact, some of the more cultic Christian twisters, or Christers, as I like to call them, those so Christians and also those suffering from delusions have been known to think that God wants them to kill their kids and he'll revive them afterwards, just to show off. And kids have unfortunately been killed by their parents because of this. So it doesn't happen often, of course, but it happens enough that I feel the need to emphasize that Isaac was not killed by his father, nor did God revive him, because there was no need to. He was still alive the entire time. This command was also specific to Abraham to ensure his lineage would be worthy and prepared to bring forth the Messiah. God would have no need to test anyone for this after Abraham, and as you can see throughout Scripture, he never does again. He especially wouldn't have to use a test to test you in this modern age, 1,000 years after Jesus showed up and negated the use for bodily sacrifices altogether. So there's really no sound theological evidence that God would ever want you to sacrifice anyone in his name, not even like animals, honestly. Like there's no need to, so don't do that. Okay? If you think he is, it's probably not God telling you this, but like some demonic force. So be wary of this going forward. Okay? Okay. But on another note, this finally shows that the whole picture of God's command and why it's important to obey without question when you get a strong conviction. And on that note, Enduring Word noted in their notes that we often say that we're not going to obey until we understand completely. And I personally felt convicted about this because I often tell God that I'm not going to budge on my gay affirming stance until I'm given a good reason to. However, upon immediate reflection, I realized this likely wasn't about blindly following the no gays rule, since this story is about a specific one-off command for a specific person for a specific time, not a general rule for everyone, always, which could also be interpreted in a different way. I think it was more God calling me out for my general arrogance, which I can accept. I guess that's true. I can be quite arrogant at times. As well as encouragement for how I view the trans community. I have often said that trans and non-binary people make no sense to me. Not probably in these videos, but I've said it in my head a lot. I don't have a lot of friends, so it doesn't get. But in my head, I've said many times, trans and non-binary people do not make sense to me, and I feel like that's reason enough to roll my eyes at them. However, I recently realized that dismissing other people's lifestyle choices is the gateway to hatred, which isn't very godly of me. So I've been trying to do more listening and less judging, and I definitely have noticed that I'm starting to humanize them a lot more than I have been. I still don't understand them, and I don't think I ever will, but I think God reminded me that I don't have to understand someone in order to obey his ultimate command, which is to love others. So that was my fun little conviction adventure that I thought might be helpful to others. If you also struggle with accepting trans people, I highly recommend seeking out their voices and doing your best to just listen and trying to find like common ground with them, and not like the Blair Whites and like the Jessica Yanivs of the world, but like the Sam Collins and the Kat Blacks. Like find the reasonable and the self-loving. Sam and Kat are actually the main ones I've been listening to here on YouTube. And I'll link their channels if you don't know where to start. But I'd also love to hear any recommendations for myself if you have any. I still need some non-binary voices in my queue, so, let me know. But anyways, let's get back to the Bible, shall we? So the angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "By myself, on the basis of who I am, I have sworn an oath, declares the Lord, that since you have done this thing, and have not withheld from me your son, your only son of promise, indeed, I will greatly bless you, and I will greatly multiply your descendants, like the stars of the heavens, and like the sand on the seashore, and your seed shall possess the gates of their enemies as conquerors. Through your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have heard and obeyed my voice." So Abraham returned to his servants, and they got up and went with him to Beersheba, and Abraham settled in Beersheba. That's what you do. God tells you you're gonna usher forth blessings of a nation, and you just go to Beersheba. So Now that we know the general details of the binding of Isaac, and we've heard God, specifically Jesus as the angel of the Lord, recommit the covenantal agreement with the added hint that all nations will be blessed through your seed because of what you did here, let's now go over all the parallels between this story and the resurrection. So we have two long-awaited miracle babies. Miracle in the sense that their conceptions were basically impossible. Both were told to be sacrificed to God, by God, and, well, technically, Jesus wasn't really told to be sacrificed to God, but that's what happened. that's, that's, that's not what happened on the surface. He was convicted of a crime of some sort, but that's how he was used. So I'm using that. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Both were told to be sacrificed to God by God, and they both arguably consented to go along with this. Isaac didn't seem to even know about this plan until the last minute, if at all, and Jesus was sweating blood before his arrest, asking God not to go through with it. So both had at least a little wariness, but for the sake of argument, let's say they agreed to be sacrificed. Both carried the wood to be used in their sacrifice, up a hill to similar places as well, possibly the same place, Moria, not to be confused with Moria, the underground Dwarven kingdom beneath the Misty Mountains, but the place that God told Abraham to go. It's actually around Jerusalem, the same place Jesus was crucified. So both did this on a hill, and there's some debate as to whether it was the same hill. Jesus was famously crucified on the site of Golgotha, which many scholars believe is in the region of Moria, which isn't like it's not a mountain, it's like a mountain range with a lot of individual mountains. It's a very hilly place. So, you might have noticed in the first verse that God told Abraham to go to the region of Moria. So there's the mountain range called Moria, and then there's a bunch of names for the individual mountains, including Mount Moria. So just like how you have like a county named after one of the towns in the county, like I live in Sonoma County, and in that county is the town of Sonoma, but you also have towns like Santa Rosa and Petaluma and Glendale, like all within the Sonoma County area, the region. Moria isn't different from that. So we know Abraham went to the mountain range of Moria, but it doesn't super specify which mountain they went to. Abraham later called it Mount Jehovah Jireh, which it doesn't look like that name stuck. I couldn't find any sites of that on any maps. But we don't know if sorry, I lost my place. Doesn't look like the name stuck. Now, Golgotha isn't actually a mountain or hill, but a spot on Mount Moria. So we don't actually know if that's the mountain Abraham and Isaac went to, much less the same specific spot as Jesus' crucifixion. All we know for certain is that Isaac's binding and Jesus' crucifixion happened in the same general area of Moria. However, it makes a lot of literary sense for it to be the exact same spot, because it's just a little too much work for God to tell Abraham to sacrifice the embodiment of the metaphor for all of humanity, set up all these parallels between Isaac and Jesus, to send Abraham and Isaac to the same region as Jesus' crucifixion, which is like 3 days away from where they live, but not go the extra mile of ensuring that it's the exact same spot as Jesus' crucifixion. I don't think it's a stretch to assume God brought them to what would later become the infamous Golgotha, because God does have a tendency to be a dramatic bitch like that, or at least the writers do. I don't know. It's just, I feel like it's a safe assumption. It's not a what's the word? It's not a definite assumption, but it's we think that's what it is. So, all that to say, both Jesus and Isaac were probably in the same spot when facing death. And with Isaac, you get both a foreshadowing and a metaphor, because not only does this prophesize the sacrifice and resurrection of Jesus, but literally in that moment, Isaac was saved because a ram, a male lamb, took his place. So not only is humanity spared, but Isaac as well. So Isaac could have been the one to fulfill the covenant as any other believing Jew could, but just as all who came before and after, they have the fatal flaw of being unable to resist sin. They all inevitably fall short of the covenant's requirements, so God is unable to bring in citizens for the future kingdom of God, the global Eden, which is sad for him because he wants us to be a part of this new Eden. So he fulfilled the covenant himself. He paid off our debt to him for us, so we wouldn't have to focus on the rules so much as the relationship. And you just gotta pass the vibe check, you know? So if you that's not the page I want. So we are left to wonder if God would have sent Jesus if Abraham refused to sacrifice his son, or even if Isaac put up more of a fight. Likely, God knew he would have, Abraham would have agreed to this, and he shaped his life in a way that would ensure this decision. Like maybe even like God telling Abraham to send away Ishmael was like a baby practice test of not having a son, you know? But God likes to incorporate our own wills and contributions as much as possible into his own plans, you know? Even God knows what will happen. He doesn't make things happen. He lets us decide for ourselves the directions to go in whenever possible. However, he does intervene when necessary. So I think of it like having your baby on a table. You know, picture you got a baby and it's on a table. It's just, you let them crawl around the top however they want to. However, as the parent, isn't it your responsibility to ensure that they don't fall over the edge? You know, would it be considered judgmental and authoritarian and having too many high standards if you prevented your baby from hurting or even killing themselves? Now, sure, if you let your baby fall off the table, that was the baby's choice to do so. You didn't force the baby off. The baby was just exercising its free will, and who are you to get in the way of that? But as we as a society, and low-key the representatives and image bearers of God, would see it as an adult neglecting their child, i.e. bad parenting. A good parent sets their kids up for success at every opportunity and tries to keep them from doing irreversible damage to themselves, while still giving them the freedom to make their own choices within the limits of the tabletop. So it's a very delicate balance. God is no different from a good parent. He could have just randomly chosen someone, and if they elected to not sacrifice their kid, God could have made the assumption that humanity wouldn't be able to understand the simultaneous gravity and weightlessness of the Messiah, and instead just let us do whatever we want without stopping us. He could have abandoned us completely and let humanity destroy itself, as only we can do. But that's not what good parents do, especially all-powerful and all-knowing ones. So he's going to involve himself. He's going to set guidelines and boundaries, and he's going to set us up for success every chance that he gets. But he's not going to be so restrictive that we can't make our own choices. You know, that's kind of why this reality we live in has been kind of dragging on as long as it has. God is letting us make mistakes and slow progress because of that. He set really basic moral guidelines. You know, don't steal, don't murder, no cheating, no lying, don't be a greedy bitch. Sorry, that was ridiculous. Anyways, and listen to my guidance alone, because I'm the only one that knows what's up. But even if we fail to follow this, God lets us confess that and pick up right where we left off. The more we follow him, the more peace that we will gain. And even though this broken world, allows us the freedom to do what we want, it's still broken and painful. So once as many people as possible choose God, he's going to fix this world once and for all, and the people who chose to be a part of it. Everyone who says, if God is so good and powerful, why doesn't he destroy all evil? But he does, and he will destroy it completely one day, but he slowed down because of our choices. We are the ones choosing to bring evil into the world. We are the ones who give space for it to exist, and God has to respect our choice to do the wrong things, as many good parents have had to do. But it's not forever. Forever will be paradise if you choose it. But you have to choose God over yourself if that's what you want to be. If that's what you want forever to be. If you choose, you have to choose. You have to choose love over hate, because the alternative is eternal darkness. And I wouldn't recommend that. I personally don't think choosing love is too much to ask of people who want to be in the new Eden, but for some people it is, and I pity those people, but that is their choice. I highly recommend that you choose love, though. It's understandably difficult. We are fallen people, and it's hard for us to be loving a lot of the times, like truly loving. But all things worth it are difficult. So I pray that you make the good choice. That was a bit of a rant, but a necessary one, I think. So just to wrap it up, this story is meant to be a reflection of the hope that was and is to come, and I hope that I've communicated that well enough for your sake. Let's take a look at the last tagged on verse just to close it out. So the end of this chapter is, now after these things Abraham was told, Milcah has borne children to your brother Nahor. Nahor, that's a funny name. Anyways, Uz, the firstborn, and Buz, his brother, and Kemuel, the father of Aram, and Chesed, and Hazo, and Pildash, and Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah, and these 8 children Milcah bore to Nahor, and Abraham's brother. Nahor's concubine, whose name was Rumah, gave birth to Tabah, Gaham, Tahash, and Ma'akah. And that's the end of that chapter. So this report is interesting mainly because it contains Isaac's future wife, Rebekah. So interest is piqued, and we are now introduced to Isaac's future wife. So yeah, that's the main thing to get from this. But that lovely enduring word commentary takes a weird turn with it and focuses instead on the fact that Nahor has a concubine. So they go on this mini rant against polygamy and how the Bible is clearly against it. But since they brought it up, I might as well push back on that a little bit, just a little bit. I would argue that the Bible is not very clear on this, actually. The Bible implies, and the assumption is that it's the preferred method to only have 2 people in a marriage. However, my motto, with implications and assumptions, is that they're up for interpretation. The Bible never explicitly states that you can't have more than one spouse. It says in a marriage the 2 become one. But it doesn't really say that the one can't add one more and become one with them as well. So personally, I recommend against polygamy more because it can split your focus and it makes it harder to have a fully committed relationship with both your spouse and God. You know, especially if your spouses aren't on the same page with you as it was with Solomon, which we'll get to eventually. Two people that get along enough that they are willing to commit their lives to each other until their death is hard enough. You know, trying to get three or more people on the same page like that is going to be a lot harder. Like, usually only cult leaders can manage that, and I don't recommend being a cult leader. So, you know, even though it's harder though, harder doesn't mean impossible. And some people do have the ability to spin multiple plates effectively, as it were. As long as it's open and honest communication, it's genuinely consensual, and everyone is, in fact, on the same page, you know, spiritually, relationshiply, whatever. I would believe you if you said God had not convicted you personally against polygamy in your own life. Like, it kind of feels like one of those gay things, you know? Like, if you're gay, like, if you feel convicted by God not to pursue gay things, then yeah, you probably shouldn't. But if you don't feel convicted, then, and in fact, you might even feel some encouragement towards that, then it's probably fine. Probably fine. It's one of those things where I think you got to look at the fruit more than the branch, you know. For concubines during this time specifically, God likely disapproved because it wasn't so much open, honest, consensual relationships as it was men collecting objectified women and trying to squeeze a bunch of kids out of them. But I think equal, healthy polygamy is possible under God's guidance, theoretically. I wouldn't make the blanket statement that it's definitely wrong. It's definitely, at the very least, a risky thing to do, and one should not engage in risky behavior that could jeopardize their faith. But the things that affect one's faith, they kind of differ from person to person. You know, it kind of just depends on you and the situation. So, if just basically, just seek God's guidance if you're not sure. Okay? Okay. And on that controversial note is where we'll end. So, as always, if you have any questions or comments, anything you'd like to add, let me know in the comments. But until then, until I can get to those comments, I like to do a prayer request time. You know, this is a church. There are other people involved, usually. So let's look at the prayer requests that we have to close with. So we still have to pray, for my cousin. And so for those who don't know, her husband died, and she actually has a GoFundMe, which I'm gonna be linking in the description. I hope I remember, because I forgot to do it for the general notes, but I'm gonna make sure that it's in this description also. I put it in the last video too, but there is a GoFundMe to kind of help her with like funeral costs, and she's gonna move somewhere where somebody can kind of help her take care of their child and all that fun stuff, like some emotional support. So yeah, there's my cousin. We're also gonna pray for Dr. Heiser and Trey from the Naked Bible podcast, who Dr. Heiser has cancer and Trey is getting through COVID. Last I heard, Trey seems to be doing a lot better. Dr. Heiser also seems to be pretty hopeful, so we're just going to encourage stuff on that. And then Mia, I don't even know what's going on with Mia. Mia has, she gets, depressed about things sometimes, and, there's just like a lot going on in her life, and sometimes she just gets really overwhelmed and just like disappears for a little bit. And so I don't know exactly what's going on with her, but I'm assuming it has something to do with her depression. Maybe there's like some like physical stuff going on, but like she just kind of ghosted me, so I don't really know what's going on with her, but I'm assuming it has something to do with like depression stuff. So we're gonna pray that she gets over that somehow, because I miss her. I miss Mia. I also don't like doing this in my van. I mean, like, mostly I miss Mia, but also I don't like doing this in my van. So we're gonna pray for that. And then for myself, on that note, I've also been kind of depressed lately, partially because Mia ghosted me, actually. Not entirely, but I don't know. Mia's kind of like the only friend that I have, pretty much, and all my other friends, I'm not really that close with them. The one that I am pretty close with, it lives very far away, so it's just, and same with all my family, like, they're all pretty far away, except for my sister. I visit my sister, and we're, like, okay, I don't know that we're that close. We're definitely friends. I don't know that we're close. It's just, I don't know. I've just been lonely, and, I don't know, I obviously, I don't go to church, which, that's their fault, but, but, like, kind of one of the cool things about church is, like, you get to be surrounded by people who are at least a little bit like-minded, and I just haven't been getting that, like, at all. Like, I was kind of hoping that this Bible study could kind of replace that, but nobody else seems to be interested in it except for me, so I'm just kind of out here by myself, and like my one support person that I had just disappeared, so I don't know, it kind of put me in a tailspin, but I'm starting to improve now, because in all honesty, like, it shouldn't matter that I am alone and I feel like nobody really cares about me, or like they care about me, but I'm like just always a low priority in their life. But I shouldn't care that I'm a low priority in their life. They're kind of a low priority in my life too. So I don't know. I think this is supposed to be a time where I stop trying to seek the validation of other people, and I try to focus more on my relationship with God and just trying to focus on that. Like I said, I am going to be moving in August, and I'm going to be moving in with a friend, and she will have to be my friend. I mean, she's a hostile, no, not hostile, what is it? It's a captive audience. So I'll have that at least, and I think I'll be able to, like, not live in a van, so I'll probably have a lot more resources to, like, really actually grow this church. But, like, for now, it's just, I think, a time for me to, like, just be with me and God, which I think is great. If I'm going to be doing something like this, I think it's good to have that foundation of, like, I'm going to be talking about God, so I should have a really good connection with God. So that's good. So this is good. It's just that, I still have to work through these, like, abandonment issues. Like, I'm coming in with abandonment issues and depression and, like, anxiety and all that fun stuff. So I'm just working through it. Okay. That's all. I actually saw a psychiatrist intentionally for the first time, and I'm actually gonna get started on an antidepressant, which I'm kind of hoping resets this brain chemistry, because I don't know, I've been kind of plateauing mentally, so I'm kind of hoping the antidepressants help me further my mental health journey, because it hasn't been going great lately. So yeah, that's basically been me. So yeah, I'm just gonna pray that I cement this idea that it's okay for me to be alone, and I don't need to be attached to people, and I just need to focus on God right now. And I'll get friends when God wants me to have friends, okay? And I'm also hoping that the meds are helpful, because sometimes meds are not helpful. And I don't need something that's not helpful right now. I need something that's gonna help. So yeah, that's the prayer request. So let's just get that out of the way. So so God, thank you for bringing us all here again, or just me, I guess. But I just want to pray for my cousin, who's still grieving, and my third, I don't even know, her son. I pray for her son as well, who's also grieving the loss of a husband and father. And I just pray that they keep they stay strong through this, but they also allow themselves to be weak when they need to be. They just let themselves feel it so that they can move on to a more I don't know, just like a more peaceful space in their lives. And I also just pray that anyone listening might feel compelled to give some financial support, just because I don't want this to be a church of just thoughts and prayers. I want it to be thoughts, prayers, and actions. And so I just pray that they feel nice enough to at least look at the GoFundMe link and maybe toss a few dollars over just to help them at least not have to worry about that while they're having to worry about everything else. I'd also like to pray for Dr. Heiser and Trey. Thank you, first of all, for making them kind of glide through all of their ailments. But preferably they get cured completely. So I just pray that you do that, because they are important people to me. And it'd be cool if they were alive for a bit longer. I'd also like to pray for Mia, whatever it is that she's going through that is causing her to isolate herself from the rest of people, whether it's something that she can't help, or that she kind of can help, but she's just having trouble getting through it. I don't know, whatever it is that's going on. I just pray that she doesn't feel so helpless and alone, and I just pray that she can kind of get a sense of where the light at the end of the tunnel is. Not so much for her, not like saying that she should kill herself, but you just get a sense of what she's supposed to be doing, and give her the energy and strength to follow through on that. She's a pretty tough person, but sometimes tough people, they play tough a little bit too long, and they just they don't let emotions out when they should. So I just pray that she's doing the healthy thing, and whatever it is that's going on with her, I just pray that she is safe and that she doesn't feel totally hopeless. I pray that she can get a sense of your hope, and I just pray that you can get her through whatever that she's going through. I also like to pray for myself. You know me, I've been on my bullshit, so just kind of help me not rely so heavily on the validation of others. Thank you for noting that that's still something I struggle with. I don't know that I wanted to know, but I guess thanks for bringing that up. But just help me to focus on the one thing that is important, which is you. And I just pray that I continue to, well, I don't know. I pray that I get better at this whole thing, honestly. I don't know. I feel like I'm not really worth anything, but I pray that I get through that. And I also pray that the medication that I've been given is also helpful, because I don't really want to have to deal with emotional turmoil on top of medically induced emotional turmoil. So if you could make the meds at least not horrible, that would be great. Alright? Okay, cool. That sounds like a plan. Well, I guess I'll go now. Well, it was nice talking to you. Okay, bye. You know what? I've been thinking, right, for Oh yeah, amen. Anyways, so I've been thinking like for prayer stuff, it's not just like a list of things that you need to ask for. You gotta also like think, and then you also gotta like confess sins. I gotta start integrating that more into the prayer time. But anyways, that's basically it for the Bible study. I always like to end on a loud worship song. Fun fact about this loud worship song, I couldn't find a YouTube video for it because apparently it's a brand spanking new song from this lovely woman named Candida Rose. She just made this like gospel-y jazz song that's just like awesome, and I wasn't even sure it was like a Christian song because when I first found it, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find lyrics. I couldn't find like a video, like anything. I couldn't find anything. It only existed on Pandora. So, excuse me. But you know, I guess a little bit more time passed, and when I like looked at it before the Bible study, I found it was released recently, and also, it is a Christian song because the genre is Christian, so that's good enough. So I wasn't even sure it was Christian at first. It sounded Christian-y, but it was kind of, you know, sometimes lyrics are hard to make out for me. I'm more of a visual person. But anyways, that's the loud worship song that I found to close this out. And you know, if you're on Facebook, just scroll up. But for those on YouTube, if you want to go into the link of the description of this video, like I said, I couldn't find an actual YouTube video of it, but you know, the YouTube music thing has it, so that's what you're gonna get. You're gonna get the YouTube music thing. So hopefully that's good enough for you, because that's what you're getting. Okay, so yeah, just click on that link, listen to it, and yeah, hopefully I can, you know, hopefully I'll see someone in the next 2 weeks. Definitely leave a comment if you can, because that makes me feel like you guys actually, not just like oh, great Bible study, okay, bye. You know, like, I don't know, like, engage with a comment. Like, I just said that polygamy is probably fine. Like, push back on that a little bit, you know? Argue with me, something, you know? I just feel so alone. So alone. But, I mean, I guess you don't have to if you don't want to. I just, you know, I'm depressed. Okay, well, I'm gonna go before I start crying, so, okay. I hope to see you in 2 weeks, and everything's gonna be better and fixed by then. Okay, bye.